Hey, seventh graders, it's good to see you guys. Wednesday, April 8th. I want to go over your readings for today and help you out with your narrations that you'll be reading or writing about this section. So, we're talking about Reconstruction and how we put our country back together after the Civil War. We want to talk about some of the things that happened in section 3 and 4 of chapter 17 today. Some of the most important things I'll highlight for us that probably should get into your narration is after the Civil War ended and the South tried to get back into business and back into making things, a new sort of system of planting, farming emerged, which we call sharecropping. And the legacy of sharecropping is not a good one because it basically was a second kind of slavery. What would happen was, since these giant plantations couldn't work anymore, the landowner would let out or lend out some land to former slaves. Said, all right, you get 40 acres, and in return, whoever was farming that land would have to give a portion of their crop to the owner. And while that might sound like a not so bad deal, in reality, it turned out to be barely enough to survive. They were charging such high prices for using land that it was just basically a second kind of slavery. People would have to work very, very hard to make any kind of progress because they didn't get a chance to own their own land. They were just renting the land. And so they never really could kind of get out of the cycle of sharecropping, and it really had perpetuated a lot of the poverty of slavery for many generations until sharecropping kind of was replaced by industrial farming. So sharecropping was a new strategy for farming the land, but it really had the same results. It led to poverty for those that were part of sharecropping. In this section, we also talk about the Compromise of 1877. There's a lot of details here that we can skip over. Here's the essential part, is that the Republicans and the Democrats had a very tight race for the presidential election. And it looked like the Democrats were going to win. And the Republicans had been in charge for a long time. And in order to break the tie, the Republicans said that they would give a lot of things to the South in order to win the presidency. To break the tie and to give the presidency to Rutherford B. Hayes, they would concede a lot of things to the South. They would take the federal troops out of the South, no more military districts. They would allow the South to figure out how to racially unify the country. And it basically was the end of the federal government trying to interfere in racial politics in the South. They said, we'll get out of all of that stuff for you. And that ended up being a really bad concession because it led to lots of abuse and Jim Crow abuse in the South. So what happened? Well, after the federal government left and they'd have elections, there were all kinds of, your book talks about tests for elections. So if you wanted to vote, you might have to prove that you could read or prove that your grandfather had voted. These different clauses, grandfather clauses, citizen, everyone was a citizen now, but they made extra rules to make voting a little bit harder. And so it was just a way to keep ex-slaves out of the voting process. It was really corrupt. So the Compromise of 1877, it kept the Republicans in charge of the national government, the federal government, but it ended up hurting the South and their chances of racial reconciliation. It let the people who wanted to keep segregation alive and well in power in the South. So it was a win for the the Republicans in one sense, but it was a loss for our country overall because it led to more racial division in our country. So that's an important part of our text. Uh, the South starts to grow economically a little bit, and it was because of free trade and capitalism. Industries started swarming in, and because there was so much cheap labor, people would work down in the South. They needed jobs, and they were willing to work for very little. Lots of industries came in, and it built that economic recovery started to be kickstarted, which is a good thing. Um, Especially mining and railroads started to be built, and and so there is some economic recovery, and money starts pouring into the South, which helped a lot of people. So the final thing our chapter addresses is, so what's the overall legacy of Reconstruction? What kind of grade could we give our country in terms of reconciliation after the Civil War? Well, some good, but mostly bad. The some good, well, we remember the Civil Rights Amendments, 13, 14, and 15. Those are important. Those were real progress. That's a good thing. But in practice and in reality, there was still so much to do, and there was no real lasting progress until the 1960s. So a couple generations are going to go by where there's still going to be lots of segregation, lots of violence against African Americans, and a lot of inequality in the laws. Jim Crow laws are still going to be in effect. So it's an era that starts out with some promise. Who knows what would have happened if Abraham Lincoln hadn't been shot? Maybe our country would have been more unified after the Civil War. But Reconstruction, for the most part, is a failure. Some wins, but a lot of losses. So that's Reconstruction. Your narration is due on Thursday of the chapter. Just a couple paragraphs. What was this chapter about? What are the main points? And show me your learning from it. That's all I want to read. So thanks. Have a good day. See you guys. Bye.